My name's Alex Bracken. I am the author of the Darkest Mind series and Passenger, as well as a Star Wars retelling for middle schoolers called The Princess, the Scoundrel, and the Farm Boy. I grew up in Arizona, and now I live here again after living in New York City and working in the publishing industry for about 6 years. So I'm happy to be back in good old AZ.
The Princess, the Farm Boy, and the Scoundrel.
Yeah.
That's very nice. Do you explain why Chewbacca didn't get a medal at the end of the day?
He gets a medal in my retelling.
Yay!
She's number one in my heart. My dad was a Star Wars collector, so it was like a really big deal to write this book. And I was so nervous the entire time I wrote it. I was like crying every single day. I was like a mess. But I did get to visit the Lucasfilm offices, which are really cool. If you're ever in San Francisco, if you can get to the Presidio and do a tour, it's amazing. Yeah.
Okay, right on. Well, whenever the students are ready to begin their questions.
Okay, I think we're going to first introduce ourselves to you.
Okay, yeah, I was going to say
yeah,
so you're not
so you're just not a blank face. Okay, my name is Anissa Hermosillo, and I'm a senior at Tinker Verde High School.
Oh my god, a senior! Yeah.
I know.
I'm Clara, and I also go to Tinker Verde, and I'm a junior.
Nice. You're having a busy year, right?
Actually, no, not really.
Really? Okay.
I'm George, and I go to Tinker Verde, and I'm a junior.
Very cool.
I'm Josh, I go to Tinker Verde, and I'm having a busy year.
I'm Bryce. I'm a freshman. Big fan.
Oh, thank you.
I go to Tinker Verde too.
I'm Connor. I go to Tinker Verde also, and I'm a senior.
Very cool.
I'm Nat. I go to Tinker Verde and I'm a freshman.
Very nice.
I'm a librarian.
Hello.
You were looking at me like, Rachel.
I was like, doesn't look like it.
lurker in the background.
I'm her lackey.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
my husband. Anyways.
Well, nice to meet you guys. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to start off. So, what inspired you to become an author?
I knew I'm one of those oddballs who knew from a really young age that I wanted to be a writer. And I think a lot of people ask how to be, like, are people born writers? I think the truth is that people are born with the inclination to create, and some people, in the case of some people, that takes the form of writing. So I knew from a really young age, like 3rd grade young, that I really loved reading. And I thought, like, surely it's as fun to write as it is to read, which sometimes it's very fun to write, and other times it's just kind of grueling hard work and revision. But yeah, and I just had, from a very young age, really liked writing, liked putting, like, pencil to paper, as they say, or pen to paper. My mom still has some of my first writing when I was, like, in elementary school, when I thought the end was just the letters DN. So, yeah, And I wrote a lot of fan fiction. You guys know what fan fiction is, I'm guessing. I wrote a lot of fan fiction when I was in middle school and high school.
For what?
Oh, I like almost don't want to say because it's still online because I forgot my fanfiction.net password and I'm terrified people are going to figure it out. It was like, oh my God. It was a lot of Sailor Moon. It was Star Wars fan fiction, of course, some Harry Potter fan fiction, a little bit of everything, some fun crossovers. And it wasn't until I got to college that I tried to write a novel or write something completely original. And I was inspired to do that with NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month. Do you guys know what NaNoWriMo is? Yeah. You know, it's so fun, and it was like the kick in the butt I needed to try it, and then I kind of fell in love with it. And that's really what got me started. And I wrote 2 books while I was in college, and the second one was my debut, Brightly Woven, which sold when I was a senior.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So start writing now. Just kidding.
So what was your favorite book to write and why?
Oh, man. I like them all for different reasons. I know that's a cop-out answer. The Star Wars book was really special to me because, like I was telling you guys earlier, my dad was a Star Wars collector right up until when he passed away. So I feel very emotionally connected to the Star Wars world and went to a million Star Wars conventions growing up, like very much love that material. But I also just really enjoyed writing The Darkest Minds. That's one of those books where, like, sometimes the muses are, you know, they just are like singing in your ear, and the story comes really easily, and you know who the characters are right away. And that was the case with The Darkest Minds. I just had a blast writing that book. And then a book like Passenger, which involves so much research and kind of is so complicatedly knit together, complex in how it's knit together, I should say. That's a slower process that can feel a little bit more like a drag, even if you love this writing this story and writing those characters. So I'm gonna go with The Darkest Minds on that one.
So our next question was why, which was more fun to write, The Darkest Minds or Passengers, which you've kind of already.
Yeah,
But
I'm
I guess
sorry.
what I'd ask is why was it more fun to write?
I think it sort of like depends on what your definition of fun is. I really loved writing Passenger because I love history. I studied history in college. It's like a pre-Hamilton fan of the 18th century. I was like your very typical 17-year-old who's obsessed with early American history and George Washington. I wrote my college admissions essay on George Washington, which is how I ended up going to school in Colonial Williamsburg. But so I loved the historical aspect. I loved being able to jump between time periods. It was just because of all of the time travel rules. Like you think if you go with the like magical time travel system, like Doctor Who, like timey-wimey, wishy-washy stuff, it should be easier somehow. But for any system of magic or time travel, there have to be definite rules. And I was constantly battling those rules as I was writing it. I would write something and I would love it, and I was like, oh, I can't use this because it's a paradox, or it's this, or it's that. Whereas The Darkest Minds, it was not so dependent on a million rules that I had to kind of stay within the bounds of. So in that way, it felt a little bit easier and therefore maybe a little bit more fun to write for more of the book. But I love them all. They're all fun. Otherwise, I would not write them.
Where did you get your inspiration for Passenger?
Passenger was actually inspired by when I was in college. The College of William and Mary is at one end of Colonial Williamsburg. I'm guessing you guys, most of you have never been. Have you been?
I've never been, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so it's at, it's so funny because I feel like everyone east of the Mississippi has been to Colonial Williamsburg and no one west of it has. It's really amazing if you ever go. It's basically a living reenactment of 1776, or maybe it's 1775 now.
Wait, I've been to Colonial Williamsburg, not William and Mary.
Yeah, okay. So
I know
William,
what you're, yes,
yeah,
sorry.
so the main street is called Duke of Gloucester Street. Doug Street, if you're a cool student. And William and Mary's at one end of it. So you were constantly, if you wanted to go running, for instance, you would run down Dog Street, and you're like dodging like tourists and oxen cart and like all the reenactors who never break character until you see them like buying their sandwich at lunch, and then they're like, leave me alone, I don't want to talk to you. But it's a really interesting place to go to school, and you're meant as like a 21st century person to feel like a fish out of water. So that was sort of the initial seed of Passenger. I kind of wanted to capture that feeling of fish out of water and juxtaposing 21st century standards and ideas and morality against 18th century. And then I wanted to challenge myself to write a very inclusive and diverse time travel book, because a lot of time travel is very North American and European centric. So it's like, let's hit all the continents in this one, and as many different time periods as possible.
So what was your writing process?
My writing process has changed a lot over the years. I will tell you the dark, sad story of what it used to be. It's not sad. It's just like terrifying to hear myself say it in retrospect. So when I was writing the Darkest Mind series, I was working full-time in publishing. I worked first as an editorial assistant for a children's book publisher, and then as a marketing person for another children's book publisher. So really when I was living in New York, like if you've ever been, you know it's exhausting. It's like, it's a fight to get to work, then you work all day, and then it's a fight to get home on the subway. So really the only time I was writing was on the weekends. So I would leave work around 5 or 6, stop and get my Chipotle on Friday, and then like go to the CVS in the corner, buy some Mountain Dew, because I did not like coffee. I drank Mountain Dew. Buy a couple bottles of Mountain Dew, be shamed by all the children who were in the store who'd love to tell me all my teeth were gonna fall out. And then I would basically just write from the time I got home until like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. I'd go to sleep, wake up on Saturday, write all through the day until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, go to sleep, write all through the day on Sunday. And that's like, I wrote the entire Darkest Minds trilogy on that schedule of just on the weekends, not having much of a social life during the weekend, not sleeping much, completely cracked down on Mountain Dew. Would not recommend this. But now now that I write full time, which is amazing, I keep to like 9 to 5 hours. My writing process is actually like very standard. It's, coming up with an idea and brainstorming and really letting it kind of like cook. Because I think a lot of young writers, or even any writer at any stage, like they'll have an idea and they fall in love with it and they want to start writing it immediately, and then they get stuck and it turns them off the story. And really what that is an indication of is not giving yourself enough time to really think the story through and ponder it and let it cook, as I like to say. So after that, I used to not be an outliner at all. Now I like outlining because I like to know how the story ends, because I think your emotion and your plot kind of have to drive up to a very specific scene that you like, that you want to end the story on. So now I really outline and I love it. I used to be afraid I'd be bored if I knew how the story would end, but it's very helpful in reducing some revision time in the end. And then I just sit down and write, and now I write from the very normal human hours of 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. and stop every once in a while to play with my dog. But other than that, feels like very boring. No more Mountain Dew. I finally kicked my Mountain Dew habit. That was a dark time in my life. Just a lot of Mountain Dew and no sleep.
All right. You kind of already answered this question, but was there anything else that's really hard about writing Passengers besides the research?
Yeah, I mean, the rules, like I was saying before, they were killer in the end, because they were really, I was like, I had to keep them straight, my editor had to keep them straight, the copy editor had to keep them straight, and we would all kind of catch little moments of like, well, this doesn't actually work because it would affect this. Time travel is a beast to write about. It's amazing and it's really fun, but oof. And sometimes, as much as I loved researching the different historical aspects, I was constantly frustrated by any facts I could not find. Like, this genuinely surprised me. When I was writing the ship scenes at the beginning of the book, I just assumed there would be plenty of like ship plans that I could find on the vast internet. No, because apparently they only commissioned actual like blueprint type plans for the warships, which these were not the warships. So I'm sure there are some merchantman ship plans out there somewhere from this time period, but I could not find them, and then I had to watch Master and Commander a lot to understand the flow of the ship. Went out and visited a couple ships and walked through them. So it's very easy to get bogged down in research when you're writing anything vaguely historical. So it's like learning to kind of turn it off after a while and not go down a million Wikipedia rabbit holes or academic journal rabbit holes, and just sitting down to write. So yeah. But honestly, it really was the time travel rules that kicked my butt repeatedly.
You already kind of answered this one too already, but
I'm like very chatty, if you could not
no,
tell.
it's all good.
These questions are amazing, I should say.
I wrote none of them.
Don't tell me that.
I wrote one. How much other research did you put into getting the time settings and historical details right?
It really was, in the end, a lot of research, and it was a lot of research that I didn't necessarily anticipate from the outset. So, things like what type of shoes would the privateers be wearing? Shockingly hard to find. Not like pirate boots, like I thought. Apparently the movies lied.
What did they wear?
It's just like very usual buckle shoes for the most part. I think some probably wore boots too, but yeah, and everything from little things like that, like what type of shoes, what their clothing would be, how those clothing fit, or what they would feel like against their skin, like if they'd be scratchy or rough, to bigger things like how Nicholas, as a biracial young man, would feel in certain time periods and how those time periods would react to him, and same with Etta as a young woman going to certain time periods. So there was a lot of big picture reading of journals. I love reading historical journals. Have you guys had to do that for school at all? People are never as honest as they are when they think no one is ever going to read what they're writing, so you can actually learn a lot. I guess I'm very nosy. I do love reading their like inner thoughts and like kind of snide remarks about family members, and just seeing how, and the dark side of that though is like when you read journals from the 18th century, there's a lot of just, it really reinforces how everyday slavery, for instance, was, how unremarkable like being a slave was to a slave owner, how people would just go about their day like this was the most normal thing in the world. So there are those funny aspects to it, and then there are those super sobering aspects to it as well. So, but I love reading journals and letters, and I guess I am a nosy person.
This is kind of a spontaneous question I just came up with.
Go
but
for it.
Why didn't you write about them going to the future? Why was it just the past?
That's a good question. And you know, it's funny because I love spoilers, and whenever anyone asks me what time period I would go to, I always say the future, so I would let everyone know if the future no longer existed. I would come back and save us all, I promise. I think in this book series, I wanted there to be some rule of why I needed an explanation for why they hadn't found Etta, and like why her mother had, I guess that's a spoiler, sorry,
No, it's
had brought her so far into the future because she thought it was out of their reach. So I needed some sort of boundary. Otherwise, again, one of the complicated things about a sprawling time travel epic journey is that you're kind of overwhelmed with choices of where they can go and in terms of time periods and locations. So I was like, I gotta like create a boundary for myself so I can focus more on the past and changing the past and how it ripples out to the future.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's a good question. I've actually never been asked that before, if you can believe it.
That's wild.
Well, I have a spontaneous question too. Did you actually write out your rules for time travel so you could keep them straight, or no?
Yeah, it's literally saved as a time traveler's guide for not getting killed. .doc on my on my hard drive. Yeah, it's like 20 pages long, and it explains to myself why I did certain rules, so I could reference it when I was working on Wayfarer, the sequel, and it was also for the copy editor. Who, if you guys don't know, copy editors are a little bit different than your average book editor. They're the ones that focus on the nitty-gritty details as well as the grammar. They're the ones that make all of us look like we are grammar queens and kings. But for instance, like in the Darkest Mind series, there's a scene where they're listening to a Doors song, and they're having two characters are having a conversation, and the copy editor was like, this song is only 4 minutes long, so it would be over by this point in the conversation. So that's like the level of detail copy editors look at. So they needed a guide to keep it straight on their end too. So it was for everyone. I'll put it online one day so you can see how crazy detailed it is.
Okay, what character do you relate to the most in Passenger?
That's a good question. I think probably Etta. Just in that, like we were talking about before, I knew from a really young age what I wanted to do with writing. And I think the reason Etta ultimately became a musician in the story was where I related to her, because writing, like, I don't know if this is actually true. If any of you play a musical instrument, feel free to shoot me down. But like with writing, and I'm assuming playing a musical instrument, the only way to improve is to put the hours into it. And if you're really focused and you really want it to be a career, like, you have to put even more hours into it. So I really related to Etta's drive, and I wanted her to be a New Yorker because I was moving out of New York at the time, and it was sort of my love letter to New Yorkers, because while I had a hard time living in New York City, I really actually love New Yorkers in general. New Yorkers are amazing in that they can see something bizarre happening on the street, and they're just like, okay, which is a great trait to have if you're a time traveler. You just need to be able to roll with the punches. So.
All right. Were you inspired by someone in your past for Alice's character?
Oh, you know what's really interesting about Alice? Alice actually was two separate characters. In the original draft of Passenger, Alice's husband was Etta's musical instructor, and Alice didn't play as big of a role. And then one of the fun things about revision is you can go back and sort of condense and combine different characters together. So I felt bad because in the earlier draft, Etta and her mom, Rose, had much more of like a Gilmore Girls-esque relationship, and that is obviously not where they ended up. So I felt like I needed Etta to have a stronger maternal relationship in her life to kind of explain how she was able to retain some softness in the face of having a very cold and distant parent. So her relationship with Alice is very warm and similar to the one I have with my own mom. So no one in particular, but yeah, I love Alice. Poor Alice.
No.
All right. If it was a movie, which actors would you want to play the people?
Oh, see, I feel like I should ask you guys this question because I don't know. I can tell you who I initially based their physical description off of. So Nicholas was in my see, I hit the microphone again. Second time. He was based off of a model. His name is Nate Gill. But I also think he could be played by the character who plays Grey Worm in Game of Thrones. That is his name, right?
Grey Worm. It's
Grey Worm?
something.
It's Grey Worm.
Yeah.
A Grey Worm.
Okay, I just got really nervous. I was like, ooh, can't be shamed with Game of Thrones stuff. And then Edo is based off of the actress Imogen Poots, who has a great name. Imogen Poots. Yeah. Or not so great, depending on who you ask. Yeah, everyone else. You guys will, if you think of anyone, let me know.
If you could time travel, where and when would you go, and what would you change?
So, if you had asked me this question before I wrote this series, I would say I really would want to go to the 18th century, particularly just before the American Revolution, because I think it would be very interesting to see. I think the most interesting time periods are the ones just before a great change happens, like through great conflict or just like a great societal change, because there you can feel it kind of ramping up, I think, just based on what I've sneakily read in letters and diaries. And I don't know why I really liked that time period when I was in high school. I think I like the personalities. It's the same reason Lin-Manuel Miranda liked Hamilton, is like the founding fathers were really young and they were like constantly fighting with each other over everything imaginable. And it's amazing that we even have a country today. So that really captured my imagination. And then I started thinking about it more and more as I was writing this series, and I was like, oh, I kind of like modern medicine. I'm mildly allergic to horses. I don't know that I could like save myself from a highwayman. Maybe I could fight him off. Yeah, I enjoy modern conveniences too much, I think, to really want to go to the past for more than a couple hours. But yeah, I think I would rather go to the future. I do love a good spoiler, I must say. Yeah. Did that answer your question? I feel like there was a second part I might have.
What would you change?
What would I change in the past? I don't know. I'm very big in the camp of everything happens for a reason. And I do believe if we could time travel and change things, the changes would ripple out the way they do in this duology and potentially have like an even more catastrophic.
So you wouldn't change anything?
See, but then you sound so callous and cold-hearted when you're like, no, I wouldn't change the Holocaust. Yeah, no, of course. There are certain...
If you change the Holocaust, then you could end up potentially changing how we view, like, Hitler. Like, because if there wasn't a Holocaust, Hitler would still just be like this random dude with a crazy mustache.
Yeah, it's true. It's so... You have to kind of believe that, I don't know, maybe there is a greater plan to all of this. I don't know.
It's controversial.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's like, who got in trouble recently for answering the question of whether they would kill baby Hitler or not? That always comes up, like, would you kill a baby Hitler? But it's sort of, I don't know. I'd have to really think about that question, but I would worry that changing one thing would ultimately ripple out and affect something else. Make it even worse.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
Are you planning on writing anything, or are you writing something currently?
I am. I'm always writing. I realized this past year that I'm working on 3 things at once, always. So I'm always drafting a book, and then I'm always editing a book, and I'm always promoting a book. So there's always 3 books on the docket. So right now, I have a middle grade book coming out in September. Middle grade is basically the term we use for the age level below young adult. So it's like the 8 to 12-year-old crowd. It's about the youngest member of a very Kennedy-esque family in a small town in Massachusetts who discovers that the reason why his family is so wealthy and famous and prosperous is because they made a deal in the 17th century with a demon, and now the demon is back to break the deal. Took it to a dark place.
I'm gonna read that.
Yeah, I think it's funny. It's my like diabolical dark humor coming into play, but it's set in Salem, Massachusetts. I hope you guys like it, even though it's for the younger folks. But
I'll
yeah,
read it.
I had a blast writing
I'm
it.
gonna read it.
So it's like, and the demon is very snarky too. I learned that the original title of the book was Bedeviled, and then I learned that you cannot have the word devil in a book for middle schoolers. If you want that book to be in like middle school libraries. So I know it could have been maybe in another life it could have been for YA, but and then I'm working on a YA that I haven't really talked about yet. It's more like urban fantasy. It's darker. Sort of like I almost don't want to talk about it because I'm not sure if it'll ever be published, because right now I'm just writing it for fun. But just between us, it's sort of like,
And anybody else
Just
who
send
listens.
it to
yeah, anyone else who listens, it's sort of like it's a book about summoners, and it's basically like a very dark, demented take on the concept of Pokemon. And it involves Greek mythology, but it's like that similar idea of having to go like hunt for the things that they're gonna summon.
Send me a
Yeah.
copy.
Okay, I'm glad you guys are my test audience. This is the first time I've ever talked about it. You got it out of me. So I don't know. Hopefully that'll be my next YA project. Just a little secret between all of us, as well as anyone who's listening. Yeah, I'm really excited about that. And then after that, I have like other stuff, but that's secret. I'm still figuring out with my editor. So those are my two that I'm working on right now.
Have you been to any of the places that, like in real life, that you wrote about in Passenger?
I've been to a couple. I've been to, I had to kind of split it between places I could actually, like I had actually been like Paris and London. And I actually took a class on World War II London when I studied abroad when I was in college a couple years back. But then everywhere else, I really had not been. Damascus, for instance, I'd never been. Angkor Thom, I've never been to. But I learned that if you ever need to write about a place you've never visited, you can count on some tourist somewhere having videotaped themselves walking through the site and then put it up on YouTube. So there are so many tourist videos that I watched, and they were all just like silent, of this person just having the camera in their hand and walking through, so you could get a feel for the layout and for like what was around and like nature sounds. So it ended up being kind of an unexpected research resource that I used. So thank you, YouTube and tourists everywhere.
So has Passenger ever been optioned for a film?
No, see, this is a little bit of a bummer for me because it's gotten close a couple of times, but I think it's just so, time travel apparently is very hard for Hollywood to do, which is why, even though there are a bunch of time travel shows on right now, you generally don't see them.
What about Doctor Strange?
That's true. See, I'm going to use that as an example.
Wait, do they time travel in Doctor Strange?
Yeah, they like
Yeah.
warp the world.
But then
Yeah.
they just kind of run
They
around
bend
the
reality.
buildings,
Yeah,
right?
they
I mean,
warp the building.
Dimensions.
Like,
but
it warps into its...
that's-
Sorry, I got off topic.
I mean,
No, but it's sort of a similar thing where it's like, I think Hollywood feels like if there are a lot of rules involved, you have to be able to simplify it for screen in a way that, so when I write a book, it's very much like, I have many pages over which I can spread description and explanation, but in a movie you have to be able to explain it very quickly because you have only about 2 hours. So my hope is one day the right person will come along and want to option it, because I think it could be a very cool little movie, but we'll see. The Darkest Minds, though, starts filming this week.
That's a wild.
I
Yeah.
saw the cast list.
Yeah, it got optioned all the way back in 2011 before the book even came out. And it somehow just has like chugged along. Every year I was like waiting for the option to expire, and they're like, nope, we're going to renew it. And then they would attach one person and then another person. So it feels very strange.
Where are they filming it?
They're filming it in Atlanta.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so if you guys somehow find yourselves in Atlanta from April to June, I think they are looking for extras. In your age range, too. Yeah. They need children to suffer as extras, I guess, in the different rehabilitation camps in the book. So,
That's great.
yeah. If you've ever wanted superpowers, now it's time.
Can I snap it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about that. Hollywood is so strange, though, because once you option a book or you sell the rights to the book, it's sort of like out of your hands. So you have to really trust the people who you option the book to, or who you let option. I'm not sure how that term is used totally from my end, but yeah, I'm really excited. Hopefully Passenger will one day be optioned. anyone out there is listening who wants to option it, just let me know. Send me an email. Just kidding.
So are you a part of like the process of the movie film? Because I know like J.K. Rowling was a part of the Harry Potter series.
The really interesting thing about a book to film adaptation is that I think it's really dependent on how in demand that book is by Hollywood. So if it's like a big auction or a big slugfest between different studios or different production companies who want the property, then those studios are much more inclined to be like, okay, we'll give, as like an enticement, like we'll give the author approval over casting, or they'll get to write the script, or you can have a producer credit. But then in the case of The Darkest Minds, which was optioned before that book ever came out or hit the New York Times list or anything, I did not really have that much negotiating power. So I'm not super involved, but I'm close with the screenwriter. His name's Chad Hodge. He and I have gone back and forth a lot about the script, just in terms of the different characters. And Jen Yu Nelson is directing it. She did one of the Kung Fu Panda movies, or two of them, I think. She's awesome. So the team is great. I'm really excited, and I feel very comfortable being like, I'm just going to focus on Book World while you guys do this, and I will be your cheerleader and super happy to give you any input you might need. But yeah, I'm kind of like low-key freaking out because Mandy Moore is going to be in the movie as one of the adult characters.
She's my favorite.
I love Mandy Moore so much. When I found this out, I was like, especially, she's so great on This Is Us, too. I think she's going to be a perfect fit for the character. But I was like, I have loved Mandy my entire life. I grew up with Mandy. So hopefully if I ever get to meet her, I will not freak her out by my fangirl cling. But yeah. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see one day. I don't know when the movie's coming out. I feel like it's so much happens. It's like nothing happens for a really long time, and then all of a sudden everything happens at once. So yeah, they start filming on the 15th. So Wednesday?
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully we'll get pictures and stuff. And I really want to visit the set in May, so we'll see if it works out.
Does anyone else have extra questions?
I can make one up.
Go for it.
Do you like any other young adult series?
Oh,
that
I
you're
have
into?
so many. And you know, it's sad because I feel like I barely did any reading last year because like it's hard to read at the same time that I'm working on a project actively. I think it's like a guilty complex that I have where if I'm reading, I feel like I should be writing instead. So, oh my gosh, I'm gonna plug like all of my friends, but they're also my friends because I love their books. So I love Victoria Aveyard's Red Queen series. She's my sister from another Mister in Madre. I love.
She's great. I'm
Yeah.
obsessed with her books.
She's a wonderful human. Susan Dennard's Truth Witch series is really good if you love high fantasy. Saba Tahir's An Ember in the Ashes series is also awesome. What else? The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. I'm reading it right now. It is amazing. I do not use this phrase lightly, but it is kind of life-changing to read this book. It's just like an important book. Gosh, what else have I been reading? I grew up reading, like obsessing over Harry Potter. I feel like whenever yes.
Have you ever, sorry, I mean, like over
We're
that
that
age.
age.
Freak out over here.
Oh,
11 when he was 11 and 17 when he was 17, thereabouts.
yeah.
I know your life. We're good.
You know, and it's so sad now because when I visit different like middle schools, for instance, which is like prime Harry Potter territory, they've only ever seen the films. They've never read the books, and I'm like, let me lead you to the lights. You got to read the books. They're so funny. They're so great. Yeah. So I've read a lot of Roald Dahl when I was younger too. Avi, old school. You guys have so much YA now compared to.
It's great.
I had to choose between Sweet Valley High and The Babysitter's Club. Or like jump up to Stephen King,
Did you
basically.
ever read V.C. Andrews?
No. I feel like my mother sheltered me from V.C. Andrews. She somehow like saw me reaching for it one day and was like, not yet. I know, I don't know how I missed him. It's funny.
Andrews is great.
I still I also missed Catcher in the Rye and To Kill a Mockingbird when I was a teenager too.
How did you miss To Kill a Mockingbird?
You know,
Too much.
Required reading now.
I know, but I think what happened was it's like in my English classes, my English teachers like rightfully wanted to break away from some of the classic literature and bring in what they felt were like new classics. So whenever they would give us a choice between what we'd want to read, I would just always want to read the other book more. So I didn't read either of those books until I was an adult. So somehow. It's amazing how that all kind of shakes out in the end.
Well, thanks, Alex, for your time.
Thank you guys so much for
Really
having me, and thanks for your
appreciate
great
it.
questions.
Yeah.
So, thank you for letting me ramble at you.
Yeah, that's great.